Welcome back, everyone. I'm your host, Gutierrez. Super excited to bring you another episode. Stay tuned.
This podcast show does not constitute legal advice.
Thank you to our show sponsor, Strike National Investigations. Obsessed with results, powered by facts. In today's episode.
Yeah, it was about a $17,000 hit. There was another store that was right in between that, and I called them. I was like, hey, just let me know if anything funny happens over there. And sure enough, 5 minutes later, they call me back like, hey, two people came in and they just like did us bad. And so looking at the trajectory, I saw that like, okay, I'm up next. Let me get everything ready. Right.
Erik, how's it going, man? It's great to have you on the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah, no, it's I appreciate you joining. Hey, so for the audience listening to this episode, do you mind just sharing a little bit of like just who you are and what do you do?
Yeah, so I have a good career in investigations, dealing from cases in litigation and sub rosa investigations, mostly dealing with AOE, COE. I started my background with national intelligence and things like that, and so after I left college, I started working on my personal career doing private investigations, which I jumped into because it was just something that, paid a little bit more, and I went through that. I was doing private investigations for a good while, and I had a variety of good contracts, but unfortunately, due to the pandemic, you can't do face-to-face interviews for fraud investigations for insurance purposes. So I kind of took a break from investigations for a year or two, and then finally, when I guess quote unquote COVID ended, I ended up in doing loss prevention for retailers, and you would think like loss prevention for retailers, that just requires a security guard at the door and, like doing things in order to mitigate loss. But there really is a lot that goes in depth with dealing with it. And one company that I worked at was a major cosmetics company that I won't name, but they took things steps forward with that. Like we had a whole network of investigators that we worked with, and keeping tabs on things like where we're getting hit, and just in general making sure that we have the information needed to keep our assets secure within the area that we worked in. And that has a lot to do with ORC investigations.
Yeah, no, that's great. And we'll touch a little bit into ORC investigations, but I want to build up on a point that you mentioned, that loss prevention isn't just standing at the door, right? I think that's for maybe for the last couple of years, that's what the majority of people's perception is, that loss prevention is just like that person with a yellow vest or some sort of like a traffic looking vest standing at the front of the entrance saying, hey, it says in big letters, loss prevention. But I remember back in my day too, when I was doing loss prevention in ORC, this was like undercover, like you're actually plain clothes within the storefronts, and somebody enters and starts displaying certain indicators that are unusual of the rest of the population, and you would essentially be conducting foot surveillance on them throughout the store, and then you will be able to rule out whether they are actually there to purchase merchandise or whether they're there for other business, right? So
yeah, that is correct. It is a common misconception that the loss prevention person is at the front door. Usually that's just a secure. Most other retailers, it's like a security guard they hire, and then they have the investigator kind of in the background waiting to actually perform certain duties that we're allowed to. That's different from the security guard, you know?
Yeah, yeah. I think that, more recently, and let me know if you think the same, but I've seen less and less plainclothes loss prevention at storefronts, and it might have to do with the risk, involved of actually having plainclothes and detaining people. Um, but have you noticed the same
No, yeah, it
lately?
is a trend in the field that, they're putting less and less loss prevention investigators out there, and that's because of the risk that the company takes when a bad stop is performed and things like that. There's
Yeah,
there's a big thing with litigation, like people feel like they're being profiled or they're being followed, etc. So it's a fine line that when you're working that position, um, there's a fine line that you're walking. You on one hand, yeah, you're out there and you're investigating, doing your duties, but on the other, you have to maintain cover and make sure that people aren't feeling like you're profiling them, you're watching them, anything like that. You know?
yeah. So 2 points. Obviously you and I, have a loss prevention background, but for some of the audience listening, first, um, let's explain to them why even loss prevention would be necessary, and then secondly, we can touch based on what a bat stop is. But, um, do you mind just sharing a little bit about why a store would even need loss prevention and the type of scenarios that you've seen in the past?
I mean, there's a variety of scenes that could occur. Most I like to go forward and think that most people are not there to take anything, but given the opportunity, you're in a store and you look around, nobody's watching you, there's no one there, you can, within the realm of possibility, pocket it and walk away. And I like to say that most theft is like that, where people just are given the opportunity. It's not that they went in with the intent to go in and steal a bunch of things, or they're just, you know, like, hey, let me go in, let me buy one item, two items, and oh, like this one's kind of out of the budget, but if I slip it into my pocket, it won't be a problem. But
Yeah, yeah,
retailers want to mitigate that type of loss because over time that does become a number that becomes more and more significant. And then apart from that, you have the people that actually go in with the intent of, you know, making massive damage and doing numbers in order to sustain their lifestyles or anything like that, due to whatever external factors that may tap into that.
yeah. No, those are great points, and I think that intent and no intent, that's one thing that I think it's worth explaining a little bit further. It almost uh I think of it almost relating to fraud, right? How there's soft fraud and there's hard fraud.
That is
Soft fraud
correct.
is
Yeah.
more, specifically, let's say on injury claims. Soft fraud would be more of somebody actually sustaining an injury, but then during the course of the claim, they, exaggerate. They're malingering. They're extending out the claim unnecessarily, and because it extends, essentially that's additional dollars that it's costing the claim, that otherwise, if they had not performed or they had not extended or exaggerated, those dollars would have not been paid out. And so that would be more of like the soft fraud, and the hard fraud is like the people that actually have intent to defraud, right? Like this is not a legitimate situation and they completely fabricated everything. So I like to see it that way, in terms of loss prevention too, because you made some great points there. Is the majority of people do walk into stores and they don't necessarily have an intent to commit theft, right? They walk in there and it's more of a crime of opportunity. Uh,
Exactly. So when I'm out there on the field and, making my rounds and walking around, I people will show indicators of, what their intent is, like looking up at cameras or kind of, um, checking aisles. And once you appear in an aisle, like they run into a different aisle.
Yeah.
Um, those are all indicators that, oh, somebody might be up to something, you know? And so
What do you,
I'm
yeah.
sorry, you were saying something?
No, I was gonna say, what do you think it's the percentage of people that actually have an intent to commit theft when they walk into a store?
You know, I worked various locations for various companies. So I would say that depending on the location, because some locations are kind of um, just heavy door movement. Um, let's say about 5% or something like that.
Hmm. I think that sounds about right. Yeah, it's like 95% just crime of opportunity. About like 5-10% is those that actually intend to commit the crime even before they walk into the store.
Yeah,
One of the
and with
things that you
that
mentioned,
5%, I
yeah.
would say that it would be there's some people that come in with just an empty shopping bag from another store, and I'll notice that and I'll be like, okay, they're here to do something. And then there's, you know, the ORC groups that go in with huge bags and they know exactly what they're doing and they're in and out within 2-3 minutes.
Oh, totally. They're fast. Let's talk a little bit about Bat Stop. All right. So, um, for why don't you go a little bit into that? What would be considered a Bat Stop?
Oh, so yeah, in terms of um, loss prevention these days, there's been different laws um, passed here and there, and companies have moved forward with adjusting to those laws. Mm, Um, Profiling has been a major issue in the loss prevention field for a while now, and a bad stop now. I would say that it's just when you go in and you perform your duties, and then finally when you're able to stop someone, and you you need to make sure that you have all of your correct like you have all of your 5 steps ready for that, which would mean that you saw them enter the store, you saw them approach the items, you see them select the items, and then you see them conceal the items, and then finally you have them walk out and you approach, right? But if you don't have any of those, then that would be considered a bad stop.
Yeah, yeah, and I'm glad that you mentioned the five elements of being able to satisfy a legal stop, because I can't tell you how many times before, or even for a while, it came out on the news too, a lot of times where loss prevention investigators were just stopping people outside, but then upon conducting further investigation, it'll be determined that maybe they missed one of the five elements and they weren't entirely too sure, right? And like you mentioned them, you see the person entering the store, right? Because now that's important, because obviously you gotta see what they walked into the store with, or at least what they have with them. And you see
Yeah,
them approaching and selecting an item, right? Very crucial, because now that's something that is being selected from your store, and then you see them conceal the item.
yeah,
Now, the concealment doesn't necessarily, and I want to get your thoughts on this, but I've seen before where some loss prevention investigators, at the time that they would see concealment, they'll make the stop right there and then. But
yeah.
concealment
Unfortunately,
is,
things have
yeah,
changed, and you know, with laws changing, it's making it harder and harder for loss prevention investigators to do their work because the clients are protected. It could be that someone is just like grabbing it, putting it into their bag, and then they walk out with it. But up until that point that they walk out, they are still okay because they might, walk up to the front to the register, take it out of their bag, and then pay for it. You know,
Exactly. Yeah.
you
Yeah,
can tell
exactly.
with body language, but legally in the court of law, they would be okay up until the point that they walk out with the item, and then the crime is committed. But until
Yeah.
that point happens, the client is still at clear. So that would be a bad stop if you stop them at any time before they walk out. Now,
Right.
in
Yeah.
order to deal with that, you have a variety of techniques that you would conduct in order to prevent that loss from occurring in the first place, or kind of in a way, quote unquote, burning the case, where you would, step into the aisle right as they're putting into the bag, and you kind of just stare at them, nonverbal
Right.
ways of you stopping that. You might be approached and say, "Oh, that was a cool item that you picked up," and in a way you're just saying like, "Hey, you're not saying that they're stealing or anything, but you're you know pointing out
Right.
the fact that the item is there, and
Yeah, it's kind of like just telling them like, "Yeah, I saw what you did, right?" And if you still decide to, pass points of payment and fail to pay and exit the store, well, just know that I'm watching you, right? And
yeah,
I
very
already saw you
much.
do it.
And I feel like most people that would be opportunists, people that had the opportunity just because they didn't see anybody there, they will kind of freak out and then just drop it and leave the store.
Hmm.
So that's the
Why?
way that's the method that I used in order to stop most of my smaller cases.
Yeah, yeah. Some people may be wondering, why would you even want to burn a case? Like, why would that be a goal to burn a case
You know
and
what?
just make it
You're
noticeable?
that's a that's a very good question. Um, in terms of loss prevention in my career, it's better if I just, let it occur and then I go and um, conduct a stop and all that. But burning the case, I feel like it's just kind of the right thing to do because I don't think most people are out there to maliciously, go out and steal and do that. And the repercussions for shoplifting is bad. So why ruin someone's day? Why ruin someone's week, month, and probably their year? Just from them doing one wrong thing. You know, they weren't there to massively steal and take a bunch of things. So why not just try to mitigate that and stop them from doing that? You know,
Yeah. No, and I think and like you said,
it's
there's
kind of
a
like
lot of
not to say that it's not that people want to do the right thing, but it's just doing the right thing. Let's not really like sure I'm there to do a job and to prevent loss, but also I'm there to do the right thing.
Yeah, no, I love that you mentioned that because, it's like going back to that scenario where you see, mom walking in with maybe two kids and she has a shopping cart full of items and then maybe, she's in the aisle alone. It's like, oh, nobody's watching and maybe the paycheck's a little too tight, so I'm just gonna slide these couple of items inside my purse. And while technically you could just let it happen and observe her, continue to the points of payment, fail to pay for those items, and then exit the store. And upon exiting the store and meeting all of those elements, she legally committed, theft. Then you stop her, and that could ruin her day, right? It obviously it's going to result in some criminal repercussions and that could affect her children too and having
Exactly.
to
And then the
leave
fact
her.
that the children are there, witnessing this happen. Um, I've had private conversations with a couple of coworkers that I had, and
Yeah.
they didn't believe in what I was doing. They're like, why would you do that? Why wouldn't you just, add to your numbers and then, making these people pay for their crimes and stuff. And I was just like, you guys don't look at the human aspect of this, that, these are other
Well,
people that are in their own positions and yeah, they're doing something bad. But if you have the chance to, stop that and make sure that they don't do it, then, you know,
Well, and
With
I think in massive in larger numbers, you are actually stopping it, because you're creating a behavior within the store that if people walk in and you prevent them from actually walking out of the store with the item, you may not satisfy the stop and you may not be able to add that to your statistics, right, of the number of stops
Mhm.
or things that that you perform. But then what is that person going to do? They're going to tell everybody else like, hey, don't go in that store and try to steal because there's people there watching you. And so
Yeah,
while you may have not performed that one stop, if you do that enough, it will create a behavior of the customers walking into the store where now they know that, hey, there's people in plain clothes here. There's investigators, and if
yeah,
you steal an item, like they are going to be watching you, and if you put it away, they might let you go, with the warning. But just know that if you walk out, like there's going to be some consequences to that.
yeah. I definitely I did enough to gain notoriety in one of the stores that I was frequently at because I would have not to profile or say anything, but a majority of our loss was because of like teenage subjects.
Yeah.
So when I was first there, it was like constant, and then over time I gained notoriety because I would see groups of teenagers come in, you know, and then as soon as they saw me, they just U-turned and walked right back out because they
Walk
already
back.
knew. They're like, oh, that's the guy.
Yeah, yeah, that's so funny. Yeah, I've had some of those situations too before where like people walk in and you just build an eye for it, right?
Yeah,
I guess you could in a way describe, well, you're looking at how fast somebody's walking into a store. You're looking at like their facial kind of expressions, do they seem like they're there for a particular item, or do you see them just kind of walk into a store and randomly start looking at everything, almost like they just want to find something to grab?
hmm
Um, and you just somehow like you just pick up on it over time.
yeah,
And when somebody walks in, it's like you just know, hey, this person, like they just displayed some behavior that I don't know what's going on, but it's gravitating me towards them. So I'm gonna,
yeah.
follow it until I can rule out that they're, here for legitimate purposes.
The way that I would catch on to people, I just mainly looked at one body language, people checking cameras and, the way they walked or,
Mhm.
um, somebody running into a store really, really fast and things like that will kind of indicate it. But the biggest one would be their, I wouldn't say that what they're wearing, like I would say it's their clothing, but I wouldn't say it's like the style of clothing or anything like that. But using their clothing, how much can they put into
Control.
their clothing,
Yeah,
So if you see a backpack, then I'm gonna keep an eye on that because a backpack is something that, you can just place items into, you know,
yeah.
or
And
like a
especially
larger
if you see, yeah, and I was
yeah,
just gonna say, especially if you see the bag like empty, right? Like it just seems like it's not like it's just light. There's
yeah,
really nothing in there.
or
But then as they progress through the store, it gets thicker
it
and
gets heavier
thicker.
and heavier.
Yeah, yeah.
No, yeah, it's either like an empty retailer bag. Sometimes they would walk in with an empty retailer bag, like still folded, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, so the bag's folded, they can't put anything in it, and all of a sudden it's not folded and there's items in there, you know?
Right, right. So I think it's important to note too that just as investigators, how we're able to pick up on some of these nonverbal cues, some of these behaviors to, narrow down who possibly is there for, to commit theft and follow them. Some of these people are also professionals, and this is more on the ORC side, right? That they walk in and they know what a plainclothes investigator looks like.
Oh yeah.
Um, and they'll be able to pick up on some of that stuff and maybe not commit the act. Um, some even go to the extent of I find this that some would even go to the extent of testing you out. It's like
Yeah.
you're following them around. They kind of know like somebody's watching them. then they'll conceal an item on purpose while they know that you're watching them, and then they'll kind of like test you around through the store to see how you behave towards them. And just as they're walking out really fast, like towards the points of payment, they'll take it out of their pocket and they'll put it right next to that cashier. And at that point, it's like newer loss prevention investigators, what they'll do is like they'll start rushing towards this person, right? Because the person's moving very, very fast towards the exit, but then they just leave the item inside the store, and now they already identify who's in that store that's basically plain clothes watching.
Yeah.
And
Just as we keep eyes on them and keep tabs on who's doing these things, um, I know for sure that they keep tabs on us as well.
for sure, let's talk a little bit about ORC. So what is ORC?
ORC is organized retail crime. That is crime committed in groups of people that hit stores constantly. Basically like career thieves.
Yeah, yeah. And I know you were involved, with ORC a lot. Um, and what are some to the degree that you can share, what are like some war stories, some, case that stands out in your mind of ORC?
One of the biggest, I actually did get one of the biggest cases on the West Coast at the um at the retailer that I was at for 2 years. Um, yeah, it was about a $17,000 hit that I prevented, and that was a massive number, and it took all of the resources that were at our hands in order to perform that um big bust. So basically, me as an investigator, we all maintain contact with each other and we share intel with each other. We warn each other, you know, hey, I just got hit over here at my store. Keep a lookout, things like that. And ORC is something that I would say is our prime directive for preventing loss, because we can be there and prevent the small things, but truly what the company wanted us to do was to prevent these massive losses and work with police, ORC task forces, and you know um, sheriff departments, working
Yeah.
with law enforcement in order to help put a stop to the ORC cases happening. So with that, we would build reports on every time that we got hit. And yeah, for this case in particular, one of my coworkers gave me a call, and he was at a store probably 15 miles from me. And it was probably two or three stores that were between me and him. And he called me. He's like, "Hey, I just had a pretty big case right now. I'm gonna shoot you over a picture. Keep a lookout." So I took the picture, and I, saw who it was. And after that, probably 15 minutes later, because as an investigator, we covered multiple stores, not just the one that we were posted at for the day.
Mhm.
Um, Another one of my stores that I was normally at, they called me and they said, "Hey, two people just came in and they just did some pretty big damage to us." And I was like, "Cool, can you send me a picture?" And they sent me the picture off the cameras, and it was the same two people. So I was like, okay, so they're traveling downward. There was another store that was right in between that, and I called them. I was like, "Hey, just let me know if anything funny happens over there." And sure enough, 5 minutes later, they call me back like, "Hey, two people came in and they just like did us bad." And so looking at the trajectory, I saw that like, okay, I'm up next. Let me get everything ready. Right. And so
Yeah.
I contacted the sheriff department, and I said, "Hey, I might need your help in a couple of minutes." And right as I was on the phone, they walk into the store. And so I run back and I watched these two people walk into the store, and it was a one male and one female subject. And the female subject had a massive, she was a skirt booster. which means that she had um like a large skirt that goes down to the floor,
Right.
and within that skirt there's a bag that they fabricate in order to be able to slide items from a slit on the side of the skirt into this like massive bag, and they're able to put in tons of items in there, you know. And so
Wow.
they targeted some items that were, you know, palm size, but retail for like $50-$60 a piece. So they just come in and they just one acted as a lookout while the female subject was just going to town and putting items in. And that was all while I was on the phone with the sheriff department. I was like, I need immediate assistance. I have all steps. I have them coming into the store, and they're placing everything into a booster skirt. And thankfully, well, at the time, the sheriff's department was very busy with other cases, and they were telling me, oh, like we have uh we have an ETA of 10, 15 minutes to get there. And I'm thinking, damn, like these guys are
Too
fast.
long.
Like there's
Yeah.
no way that I can keep them in the store for 10 minutes. So I had to get on radio with the people that worked at the store. And I was just telling them like, hey, just let you guys know, we have some people in the store. Please, if you see them, just avoid them and go into another aisle. Like don't help them out. It's fine. Let them do what they need to do. You know? And that's also in terms of safety, because I didn't want anybody like, just in case like they saw something and, you know,
Right.
the subjects get aggressive and maybe hurt them, because that's
Yeah.
another personal directive, not something that I was really in charge of or told like, make sure that people are safe. But I feel like it's just something like the right thing to do. The last thing that I would want is that while I'm on the job, somebody gets injured from somebody, you know, getting crazy on them,
Yeah.
you know? So yeah, I was able to entertain them for about 10 minutes until the police arrived. But I guess they had their fill and they went to town on us, and they walk out, and I go and that's when I go and make contact. You know, I have all my steps and I'm ready to detain. I'm just going to entertain them until like the police arrive. So I approach them, and the female subject just tells me like, oh no, we didn't do anything, etc. I'm like, no, it's fine. Let's just go in. We need to talk, you know, just doing my proper
Right.
steps. And the male says, like, she doesn't want to talk to you, whatever. And then he goes and he shoves me. Now at this point, once he pushes me, that turns it into a different charge
Right.
in the state of California. It's no longer just regular theft. At that point, it becomes robbery, I
Right.
believe.
Yeah.
Yeah, because he's physically harming me in order
In
to
order
conduct
to,
it. Even though he just shoved me,
yeah,
like that's still
contact.
physical aggression.
Yeah.
And
It just turned
so
it into a felony automatically, with regardless of the value of the items, right? Because for some of the people listening, in California, there's a threshold of the value that somebody needs to be able to take to be considered either petty theft or grand theft. And petty theft would be a misdemeanor, grand theft would be a felony. But regardless of the amount that they're taking, the minute that they're using physical force to be able to take these items against somebody's will, that it turns it into robbery, and that robbery is a felony, and it's considered a violent crime. So it's just upscaled the charges automatically.
yeah, so at that point he upscaled the charges, and yeah, he pushes me out of the way. I kind of take a step back, and they start running towards a door, an exit in the mall, and right as he's about to exit, he sees the police cruiser rolling in towards him, and he has a moment. He's like, "Oh shoot!" He pops a U-turn and starts running. And meanwhile, the female subject stays behind, and I found that kind of odd. She kind of just turned around and turned herself into me. She says,
Mhm.
"I'll go with you. I don't want to run," but
Yeah.
the male gentleman runs. The sheriff department pulls up, kind of um, starts to analyze the situation, because obviously they don't know what's going on. but I just tell them like, hey, I'm a loss prevention for them. She's here. She already said that she's complying. The gentleman went up the stairs this way, and so there was a whole chase, and unfortunately, the male gentleman got away, but we did get the female, and so they took the female into custody, and yeah, the reason for her turning herself in is that she was actually pregnant at the time, so she wasn't able to like run and do all that, you know?
Yeah. Or I mean, that was just not going to be safe for her either, right? If this resulted in some sort of altercation, um, it wouldn't have ended good. So she made a good choice. Um, Man, yeah, no, that's crazy. You know that the amount you said was like 17,000.
Yeah, something.
Wow. That's a large amount. And I give you kudos for, taking the initiative of telling your staff not to engage them in the store because I remember when I was starting my career and then I was doing loss prevention too in retail, that same thing. We were just monitoring somebody that walked into the store. We knew who they were because of just, pictures and just intel that's shared, within the team. So we knew what they were up to and we just kind of let them do their own thing. Hey, take the items. We'll satisfy all elements. So once they walk out, we'll perform a detention at that point. Um, but I remember that we did the same thing as my partner and I. It was two of us, and we told everybody in the store through radio, and everybody was like wearing the earpieces, so we weren't concerned that they were going to overhear us. We said, do not engage them. They're taking some items. You might notice that what they're doing, but just don't engage them. Don't get close to them. And as they're walking out, like one of the cashiers just steps in front of them and like tries to prevent them from going out, which one that's impeding the elements to be fully satisfied, right? Because they still have not stepped out of the store.
Hmm.
So that's preventing from, failing to pay from all points of payment. But two, this was two males, and one of them like literally tackles the cashier down, and as they're kind
Yeah,
of in a physical altercation, the male actually takes out a knife from his pocket and attempts to stab the cashier, and luckily that cashier was able to kind of like push him away and he didn't actually get stabbed, but then he just took off running, and like after, well, like the at that point, like we already had like PD on the phone, and like everybody's like rolling in, and then they chase them and eventually arrest them. That was assault with a deadly weapon at that point, and they charged with robbery because they end up actually walking out of the store with the items after all. And it was just a bad situation, but it could have been much worse, right?
yeah,
If it luckily, the cashier was able to push himself away and didn't actually get stabbed. But man, what if it had not actually happened that way? That could have been lethal. And it's not worth it. I mean, at the end of the day, yeah, it's property. It might be a large amount that somebody's taking, but it's not worth your life. And,
yeah.
if they have,
It's an item, and I always told uh all of the people that I work with, I was like, leave all of this to me. Like, your job is sales and service. My job is loss prevention. Leave that to me and don't worry about it because it is dangerous. They
yeah,
could anything could happen. And even in today's laws, like that cashier probably would have been fired, you know,
yeah.
because there's a lot of things happening that
No, he for sure was, I don't think he was fired, but he for sure was reprimanded,
yeah,
for
on
doing
like,
that.
yeah,
One,
they probably
because
had to
we
do a
told
whole
him not to.
investigation.
Yeah, one, we told him not to engage. Two, he was, impeding our investigation at that point. And three, it was just not good. It was just not a good situation for anybody. It resulted in obvious, he actually did sustain injuries, from the whole scuffle and everything. And all of this could have been prevented. For us, I mean, we were going to make contact once they exited, But if they like take off and they run and eventually they get away, we know who they are. We have their identity, as part of our overall ORC investigation, and eventually we'll get them. It's just going to be
Yeah.
a matter of continuing the investigation, and it's not like, okay, they got away with another 5K of items. Okay, that's 5K added to the list, right?
5K
And
added, and once they get caught, which when they keep doing this, they
yeah,
eventually do get caught. All of the cases that were previously put on them get added to that
yeah,
major to that one stop that they got.
yeah, yeah. Which brings me to the next point, which is, you touched based on it a little bit at the beginning, which is surveillance, right? Um, Very important in ORC, because sometimes the whole goal is not to actually detain them outside of the store for ORC. Like sometimes you want to follow the money, right? You want to
Mhm.
follow to see where that merchandise is going, because yes, you might be able to stop them outside. They might cooperate with you, and you're preventing them from taking, I don't know, 2, 3,000, 4,000, $5,000 of merchandise. But the bigger picture is that merchandise is going somewhere else. Where is it going, so that we can bust that location, with the police department, and seize everything, and being able to get to the main heads of this organized group, right? Um, did you ever engage in any like surveillance, anybody, like once they left, and kind of follow them from there?
Yeah, I work closely with the police departments of the stores that I um helped out at. So I think my closest I guess contact was the Irvine Police Department. They were really helpful. They had their own task force. They even had like on-site PD that I became friends with because, we were all on the same page, working together. So yeah, with them, they would kind of let me know what was going on, and people that they were targeting, and I would help them out with you know providing them with surveillance video of them entering the store, and they would let me know ahead of time, like, oh hey, we think we have a group entering the area, like please keep a lookout. And along with them, and all of our investigators in house with our retail group, we all work together to make sure we bust these ORC groups. Um, and then even other retailers, we collaborated with competitors and even just
Uh-huh.
people that worked nearby us. I had a very close connection with another retailer where he would come in and check in with me, and he's like, "Hey, if you ever need help on a case, just call me and I'll run over and we'll do it." I'm like, you don't even work with me." Like, you know?
Well, but it benefits everybody, right? Because, these people essentially, if they're doing it with one retailer, they're doing it with everybody else. So they're
Exactly.
they're coming and they're gonna hit you with, taking all these merchandise, but then maybe 2 days after they're gonna go to the neighbor and do the same to them. So that's, yeah, I like that you touched point on the importance of collaboration, even if it's not, within your same internal team, but just networking with everybody else, and doing that collectively, because you're able to put somebody away that overall is just stealing from everybody. Well, that's obviously going to benefit you, but it's going to benefit
Yeah.
everybody else.
Because they need to keep stealing, that particular contact, he had his own thing. And, one time he did call me out. He's like, hey, like, come and help me out. Watch my other exit and then just follow them. And so I was able to provide that surveillance for him, and he eventually busted an ORC group, which in turn led to them finding the stash house. And it was a whole intricate network of people taking things, and then they take it to a house where they they sell it from there. And he called me up. He's like, "Hey, um, we have our items here, but then there's a lot of items that you guys sell at your store. If you can come over and identify, you know."
Yeah.
Then we would go over there. Yeah, sure enough, like they had items that we carried, and we were able to connect that to a case that we had, and we were able to, get some charges added to that.
Yeah, that's insane. It's and a lot of these people that are involved in ORC, committing these crimes at a larger scale, usually they don't start at the ORC level. They start at the crime of opportunity phase where they'll walk in and they'll maybe just put, one item in their purse or their pocket, and then they'll walk out and then they're like, okay, I got away with that. Next time I'll double it, right? Okay, I got away with that. And then they keep increasing, increasing, increasing. So it's actually a behavior that keeps worsening over time, the more and more they get away with it. So eventually now they go up to the larger numbers where now they're not just hitting one store, but they're hitting multiple stores. And these groups are very organized, right? Like they're like a well-oiled corporation. You got the people on the ground, collecting the merchandise. Then you got the transportation from there, taking it back to the distribution center, which is the stash house. Then you
Yep.
got the processing, people once it's there, whether they're rebranding it or where they're repackaging it or whatever they're doing from there, and then distributing it from there. And then you got the collections aspect, the people with the money, and then that money's probably going to lead to purchasing some other stuff to, fund a bigger operation. And it's like, it's an ongoing,
People don't
it-
realize the scope of this. Yeah. You see it on the news all the time. I used to see it on the news all the time. And before I joined uh the loss prevention field, um, I was just thinking, well, they're just making a big deal out of it. But no, it actually does lead to bigger things. It even goes as deep as, even human trafficking that they're using to fund these operations. You know,
yeah,
they'll bring people from abroad where, it would be difficult for them to get charged, or they just would just get deported or something like that.
yeah,
They bring them in and they're the ones that they have, going in, selecting, doing the actual work of it.
yeah. No, that's a great point that
It's
that you
it's
bring.
shocking, really.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
there's not much that they can do about it.
exactly. It's a bummer, man, but it's an ongoing kind of issue. And so as long as, there's retail, and so as long as people can continue to, which I don't think any of that needs to change, right? I think it's convenient to be able to go to the store and to be able to, select your items and purchase them. But just like with anything, there's going to be always those players that are going to try to take advantage of the system. And that's why it's so important to be able to have some sort of defense line, as an employer, as a retailer, whoever is selling this merchandise, being able to have a team that has experience with these type of situations, so that not only, that team can address them, but can address them the proper way too, to make sure that you're mitigating your legal exposure, that you're mitigating risks, of like injuries or other components happening, and just positively impact the company rather than, bring negativity into the fold.
Yeah.
As we're wrapping up this conversation, education, it's one of the things that we as an institute, we see it as the great equalizer in the world. Being able to have access to education, and being able to, not just in one particular concentration, but investigations in general has, you know, it's massive. There's so many different disciplines of investigation. There's forensics, there's loss prevention, ORC, insurance defense. I mean, we won't be able to name all of them. Why do you think, in your opinion, why do you think education is important?
Education is very important. Without education, you don't have the basically your foot in the door into the investigation field, because you need to develop your skills as a writer. You need to develop that keen sense for, or basically get an eye for investigations, like, making sure to read all the different variables at play in order to get all that. And education is the stepping stone into the field. Yeah, experience matters, but without education, you won't get that experience. You know, my career started when I was in college, and I went um, into international studies um, and I was one of the top performers in my college. So that gained the interest. The I got the interest of the intelligence community here in the United States, and they kind of recruited me to come in and do some interning and just in general going in on cases that they had open. So without that, I wouldn't have gotten that particular experience in the intelligence community.
Yeah.
And then after that, I got contacts with people in like private intelligence and like doing private investigations, things like that. And so after a while, I was in school, and then I got out of school and I just went straight to work in private investigations, doing sub rosa contracts, working in drug enforcement, things like that. And
Yeah.
that led to, you know, private investigations, doing fraud investigations for insurance companies, things like that, dealing more with litigation. So I hopped from like, the different aspects of investigations being national intelligence, being in private investigations and litigation, and even into retail ORC investigations.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah. What do you think that so when as you were making your transition into private investigations, if you would have had a platform, let's just say an institute that, provided all of the qualifications and training that you needed to be able to fast forward your career in any of these concentrations that you mentioned, fraud investigations, loss prevention, surveillance, or anything how how would have that impacted your career? Do you think it would have gotten you to where you wanted to be much faster?
oh yeah, definitely. I was lucky enough to, already be in school and go into the intelligence field, which was, I think in terms of investigations, that's probably the top tier. But I think in order to get into private investigations, I wouldn't have gotten there without that experience. So if I never got that experience, it would have been really difficult to get into investigations. They would want to see, like, oh, he did loss prevention for 3, 4 years, Whereas if I were to have gone to school and had that investigation experience, I would have gotten, into that position without having to kind of already
Yeah,
have to
your
gain
way
experience.
around, right? Yeah. Yeah, it's like just being able to learn it the right way, without having to fumble your way around and hoping that somebody's gonna take you under their wing and at least, teach you some things of the
Yes,
trade.
because that is the state of the field at the moment, that you kind of just have to be selected. Somebody has to pick you and take you under their wing and teach you the ways of how to do investigations, show you how to do it right, telling you what you need to look out for, indicators, the different variables that are at play. Whereas, if you're already in a school and taught all of that, then you won't need that because you already have a ground, a basis to go off of. Now you just the actual experience of
Yeah.
performing the investigations.
Yeah, yeah. Ultimately, I think it just gives you control of your career, right? You're not hopeful anymore that somebody's gonna pick
Yeah,
you and say, "Hey, I think you would be good at this," or "Sure, I'll take you under my wing and give you a shot." It's like, no, you don't need that anymore. It's like you now have a school, you can, educate yourself, become certified in these concentrations. Now you actually need just the hands-on experience, but that gives you control over your career, and you're not dependent on others anymore. So
exactly. You're not waiting on different positions to open up and to get that experience. You just already kind of have that footing. So you can just jump into whatever you need to jump into.
yeah, that's awesome. Well, hey Eric, it was great chatting with you. And loss prevention ORC, it's always an interesting topic to talk about. It always brings back memories,
Yeah. Good battle
on my
stories.
end of yeah, like just being on the on the floor and doing the rounds and walking around, seeing who's there to do what, and then looking for those elements and doing all that stuff. So I appreciate you joining the show, and I know that everybody listening to this, would find this episode beneficial. So thanks a lot for joining.
No, thank you for having me.
Hey there, thanks again for tuning in. If you like this type of content, go ahead and subscribe and hit that notification button. Next time that we publish something, you're going to be notified right away. Thanks again. See you on the next one.